Welcome to the School of Wedding Photography. I'm here with Erich McVey, a fine art film photographer based in Oregon in the United States. Hey Eric, how you doing?
What's up, Nicholas? Good to be here. I appreciate you having me.
No, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us. Eric's been called one of the top wedding photographers in the world by Harpers Bazaar just recently, Martha Stewart and Brides magazine. How do you feel about all that?
Well, it certainly feels like a culmination of a lot of hard work. If nothing else, it just tells me that I'm doing the right things.
Yeah.
I don't garner a lot of self-worth from those sorts of things, but I get a lot of satisfaction from knowing that the business is going in the right direction and that people appreciate my photography and that it's reaching a wide audience. So those things to me say those things more so than, you're cool or you're loved or you're liked. It's just, for me, the business too of photography is as big a part of what I do as the art, and just reaching a lot of people and propelling the business forward. I get as much satisfaction from that as I do from creating a beautiful image. And when I pop up on lists like that and on yours, it tells me that just as much as it tells me that I'm taking beautiful photos.
Yes. Yeah. That's an interesting point.
Because also there's a lot of amazing photographers that I know that are a lot better than me that don't make it onto those lists, and it's not because they aren't every bit as good or better, but maybe just because not enough people have come across their work, and that's a big part of what we all have to do as artists and photographers, is finding ways to
Marketing.
Get eyes on us.
Yes, yeah. So what do you think has been your difference? How have you sort of achieved that?
Well, a huge part of it has been my wife, Amy. Her background is in marketing and PR, okay. And her background's not in photography at all, but she came on with me for my photography business back in 2011 and full time, and was able to really focus on that part of the business while I was able to focus on getting better at my art, getting better at photography and film, and doing all of those things and delivering for my clients, while she was really good at strategizing and saying, here's how we're going to get you out of Oregon and into California, then beyond California and out into Europe and Asia and wherever. She had the vision to get us there. And without her, I'm 100% sure that I wouldn't be nearly where I am today.
Right. Okay.
But it's obviously luck. A lot of it is luck, but a lot of it is actually setting a goal and doing everything we could, pointing all of our efforts towards achieving that goal. So again, when I was just shooting in Oregon, my goal was to expand and shoot outside of Oregon. And so we came up with a list of things that we needed to do to get there. And those are the things that helped us do it. And of course, just working hard and doing really fine work, just always trying to get better and put our work out there into the world so that it was unavoidable for people to see it. All of those things, I think it takes all of those things combined to get, I know at least to get to where I've been able to get to today from where I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So did you have a written strategy? Was it that level of sort of detail?
It probably wasn't written, but it probably was. I mean,
it was thought through.
Our fun for the last 8, 9, 10 years, especially in growing the business, during this time in our lives where we have been growing the business, our fun is talking about business.
Yeah, okay.
And talking about how to do these things. So we would just, we both work together full time, and we would just spend days and drives and dinners talking about what we needed to be doing and what we were going to be doing next. Yeah. And it wasn't a chore. I wouldn't say it was super formal, bullet pointed, but it was talked about enough to where we followed through and did those things, and we checked in often enough with each other, and she kept me honest and working hard. Whereas if I were just doing it myself, I could have easily dropped the ball or not had the motivation to do so.
Yeah.
Because definitely in my younger years, I'm 32 now, but I started the business when I was closer to 23, and I was just a loser at that point in terms of not in my achievement or talent, but in, I would say, my follow through and work ethic.
Yes.
At that point, compared to now.
All right, good to have you back, Eric.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah,
over
man, here. Skype. Get back together. All right, listen. Let's just jump ahead. Actually, let's jump back. Can you just tell us about your story? Tell us about you.
Oh my goodness! How far do you want me to go back?
Till you were an embryo.
I was born in Salem Hospital. No, let's start. Let's start. I was finishing up at university when I was about 22, and I was in my last year, and I was studying digital arts.
Okay.
And I got a call from my mom who said, "I've lined you up for an interview to be a photographer." And
Okay.
I'd never had any interest in photography. I'd never owned or picked up a camera really. But so I said, "No, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I'm going to make a fool out of myself." But she's a hardcore ex-military woman who's very persistent, very, very nice, kindest woman in the world. But you don't say no to her.
Don't say no.
So
Okay.
she with some convincing, and her and my dad buying me a camera, I agreed to do this interview test shoot for a pretty big company, and I just happened to get this interview because she knew the brand manager at the company.
Okay.
She had this personal connection.
Yeah.
Anyways, I had my friend Stephen Wood, who owns Photovision, one of the top film labs in the world, and my closest friend growing up. He showed me how to use the camera. I had a few days to learn and went and did the test shoot. And for some reason, they liked what I did, so they hired me to shoot their ad campaign for an entire summer, an entire year, really, traveling and shooting this sort of commercial campaign for a retirement home community. So I was traveling all over the United States and shooting old people in retirement homes.
Yeah.
That was my first gig. And the best thing about this whole situation is not that it's what started my photography career, but this is how I met my wife, Amy. Is I was paired up with her to work together on the project, and she was working in the corporate offices of the company, and she was in charge of ultimately in charge of carrying out the project. And so it was just her and I traveling on these week-long or 10-day trips all over the place, and we were either gonna love each other or hate each other by the end of it. But I got in enough dinners and movies to sway her in my direction, and we were inseparable ever since. Right. So from there, I really thought that I would probably be more of a commercial type photographer, because I liked shooting buildings and landscapes, all the things that at that time I considered easier to do than shooting people. I had absolutely no idea how to light people with natural lighting, because this first photography job was we'd basically bring a pop-up studio everywhere with soft boxes and a backdrop. So I didn't know how to light people with natural lighting, and I didn't know how to direct or pose people. So as you know, people start to find out you're a photographer, and they start asking you to shoot family photos or, you know, senior portraits or things of that nature. It was really hard at first, and I didn't really want to do it because it was difficult and I didn't know what I was doing. But you do it anyways because, you know, it's a family friend or somebody, you know, somebody in the community. And eventually I realized that there was not a living to be made in the commercial realm for me, especially living in a community with only 120,000 people of Salem, Oregon. But there were paychecks coming in from shooting portraits and families. And eventually I got roped into shooting a wedding. which was extremely difficult again. And so funny because my first wedding was at a hot springs, which was clothing optional, like a nudist community. So, and I had my whole family there assisting me on the wedding. My little sister and my mom and dad and Amy were all following me around, carrying big lights and a battery pack, because I didn't know how to use, the only type of lighting I knew how to do was with off-camera lights and big ones at that. So they were following me around. It took a whole team to shoot this wedding that I probably charged, $500 for.
Yeah.
And there were naked people scampering around the premises and bathing in the river while I was shooting the couple's portraits, and sort of hanging out on the rocks behind the ceremony, topless and bottomless while shooting the ceremony. So it was a great introduction to shooting weddings. From there, if you want me to continue,
yeah.
I was shooting digital at that time, because really when I started shooting in 2008 or 9, that was the option. I didn't even know, I didn't know anything. I didn't know film was a thing.
Yeah.
And so I was shooting digitally for the first 3 years and building my business, shooting, sometimes 30 weddings a year and 50 senior portraits and probably 100 shoots total for the first few years, just getting out there and shooting and trying things and getting better each day and learning from my mistakes. That was definitely what, I guess, allowed me to progress as a photographer. It wasn't, I didn't read a bunch of books or do a bunch of online tutorials, whereas I probably should have, and they would have helped me. But I just went out with the camera and shot as much as I could, and thankfully was getting paid to do it, and building the business as well.
Yeah.
And then basically in 2011 is when I got married and hired our wedding photographer, who's Kirk Maston of the Maston Labs presets. He's just an incredible photographer and software developer, all around awesome dude, who was really starting to get his feet wet with film at that time as well.
Yeah.
And I was really drawn to his film images, and I was really drawn to the film images that he shot at our wedding in June of 2011. And when we got our wedding photos back, I realized that was like the smoking gun for me, just telling me that film is the format that I'm really drawn to, that I really connect with. And I started doing more research online and looking up film photographers, and came across Jose Villa's work, of course. And I saw that he was doing a workshop, and I signed up right away and went in November of 2011.
Okay.
And bought a Contax 645 the week before the workshop. Hadn't even shot a roll through it, but I brought only that camera to the workshop, and told myself, if I'm going to learn this medium, I'm going to do it the right way, and I'm going to do it the right way by being around the very best and learning from the best, but also not giving myself the opportunity to fall back on what was comfortable, which was shooting digitally, which I probably would have done after the first day, where I went through the whole day with my camera on aperture priority, thinking it was on manual, and underexposed everything because I was backlit, and I never did that again. So that was a good time to do it. But that could have easily scared me out of film right there, because I didn't know what I was doing. But it was good to be around all of these like-minded photographers who were learning either a little bit ahead of me in terms of having shot film for a couple of years, or were in the same position as me, and we could really just collaborate and be able to talk each other through it and learn from each other. And having Jose there and his amazing team to learn from the very best in the industry was the perfect way to jump into shooting film and get a lot of mistakes out of the way and learn the right way and start off on the right foot. And then that was about 7 years ago. So from there, I've been shooting almost, very, very much primarily on film, on medium format film, on the Contax since that point, as any time that I have enough light to do so.
Yeah.
And really never looked back. I feel so connected to it and the process and the result. And it would be hard for me to, if film ever did go extinct or, they stopped making film, it would be difficult for me because I feel that's where my heart really is. And I do connect with a lot of digital work and love what a lot of photographers do with that format. But for my approach and my work, I consider it a huge part of that formula.
Yeah. If there's some photographers out there and they're curious about film or they're thinking about getting into it, what are the reasons that you love film? Why would they also want to consider it?
Absolutely. Longevity, I think, is a huge thing for me. Being able to, wedding photographers have a very high burnout rate. I think you would corroborate that.
Mm-hmm.
Most don't you don't see a lot of wedding photographers that are 50 years old or even in their 40s, I think. And I think there's a reason for that. And I think it's because it's really hard on you. It's hard to stay enthusiastic and have the spirit for it for decades on end, because I think when I was shooting digitally, it really burned me out quick. If I was doing 100 shoots a year and editing all those shoots and sitting in front of the computer, I think I lost the zest for why I really loved photography in the first place. And I think I was also worse when I went out and shot because I was more tired. I was less enthusiastic. I was more inclined to think about, well, I'm going to have to edit these shots after I shoot them. So that's a bummer. And I'm not nearly as excited as I am now when I go out and shoot film. And the waiting period with film, I consider it a bonus and an exciting part of film and the process. It reinvigorated my love for photography, where I'd only been shooting for a few years, and I think I would have had an expiration date of only a few more years if I hadn't found film. So the final product, of course, is what drew me in the first place. I always have a hard time describing it and quantifying, why I love film in terms of the look that is created with film. To me, it's very much something that when you see, and I don't like to talk in pixels or resolution or anything really technical. But the colors certainly I have found are very hard to replicate. The ability for a medium format camera, that depth of field, for the ability for it to be sharp in the right places and then soft in the places that make things look very beautiful. And of course, I know that can be achieved with medium format digital photography, but the combination of those colors on film and that depth of field, and of course the grain structure and everything that kind of comes together to create that imagery, it's just something that when you see. And I'm a big fan of emotive imagery and images that bring about emotion and show emotion and also have motion. And I think film captures motion extremely well, because of course it's actually being, that moment is being imprinted onto a negative, as opposed for, digital pixels deciding exactly where to go and how to look. And I know I could be disputed on that. I'm not the most technical person, but I have always loved the way that motion looks on film, and always found that there's a little something extra special about it, at least in my work. And whenever I talk about this stuff, I'm really referring to my own work.
Yes.
I'm not referring to anyone else's. So it's the things I love about film and film as compared to digital in my own work.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Do you think you'd ever go back to shooting digital exclusively?
Not unless I had to. No,
Yeah,
I wouldn't. I also love the process of going out and shooting film. It slows me down. It makes me more intentional. I'm a better photographer. I'm more patient. I curate moments and images more. I curate everything from the subjects to the background and the light. I'm really making sure that all of those things are working together in each image, or at least I like to say that. I'm at least more, I take more care than I used to and do if I'm shooting digitally. And again, I know there are so many people who that is not true for, who do shoot digitally, but for me, it changes the way I shoot, and I like the way that film changes the way I shoot. I would have a hard time going back because I have, after 7-8 years of shooting entirely on film and seeing these results that are just, to me, a dream come true for me to be able to create exactly the type of images that I want to create. I wouldn't change anything about them. Not to say that I can't always get better and that I'm not trying to get better, but to me, it's just, it's perfect. And
yeah,
it would hurt, it would hurt me to go back, because I don't think I would have the same type of satisfaction, or I wouldn't be as proud of myself each day, when I see my images, if they were shot the other way.
yes, yeah, okay. Yeah, I came across someone recently who claimed to shoot 30,000 images per wedding. And
What?
yeah, and it kind of blew my mind. Where are you at when you shoot a typical wedding? How many are we talking? Roughly.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I think 2,000 images on maybe a 10-hour wedding day is right in the ballpark.
Yeah. Okay.
And that would be film along with the digital images that I'm shooting. So the mix of images might be, it might be 80 rolls of film, which is mostly 120, but also some 35 millimeter. So that might equate to, say, 1,500 images. And then the other 500-600 would probably be digitals that are during, the nighttime reception.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
And then I would deliver about 12 to 1,400 would be a good bet these days.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's gone up every year. It's too much, but I walk away from every wedding with zero, no. Oh, sorry. I just lost the word, but zero regrets. I walk away from every wedding with zero regrets.
Yeah.
And I really have a high rate of client satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of that is that I leave it all out there on, I don't leave anything out there.
Yes.
I do everything I can to capture every moment and make sure the client's happy. And if that means overshooting a little bit and over delivering, I am perfectly fine with that, because it means that I'm almost guaranteeing that any reasonable person is going to be happy with their photos.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I saw a video of you and Amy, I think sitting in the same room. I can't remember who it was for, but I think she said something which I found interesting, which was that you are your brand, but your brand is not you. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Oh boy, she is so much better at talking about that than I am. I would say the biggest thing that I could elaborate on that point is that none of my value does not come from it. First of all, my value doesn't come from my business and the way that people perceive my photography. I have a lot of other things in my life that really that bring me that true value. The business is and my photography is a way to provide for my family, but that's not where my value comes from. I think people have a hard time detaching and separating themselves from their business. They live vicariously through their business, and they take things really personally. So if they're not doing well, if they're not booking as many weddings as they hope, it really brings them down, and they devalue themselves. They let that define them. So I think that's part of it. But also, it also means that and literally she's always the one who talks about this, but your brand can be something different from your personality, from you as a person. If I'm a really outgoing person who's really wordy and really goofy, it doesn't mean that my wedding photography brand can't be something completely different, very high end and minimal, and not wordy, and letting the images speak for themselves. And I think that would be how I would probably characterize myself in reality and my brand. So I think that's what Amy kind of means for that, but she's probably going to be cringing and saying, "You're missing the main point." I usually zone out whenever she talks about it, because I've
well, you shouldn't
I've heard it so many times, and I really I should listen to her more often.
How do you define being a successful wedding photographer?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think it's different for everybody. For me, I certainly do. There's a couple different things here. Of course, it's in the art, and constantly pushing myself to get better and try new things, and hope that my imagery and the product that I'm delivering for a client, we'll talk in terms of weddings, is getting better and better all the time. So hopefully I can, look at galleries from 2018, and that they're going to be an improvement from galleries in 2015, and that I'm doing all the same good things, but maybe some things that are very good, but new and different, and just adding to my value, because hopefully I'm raising my prices year to year, and I want to be earning that. I don't want it just to be arbitrary. I just raise prices because that's what you do. I want to be getting better and delivering a better product that merits that investment. Yeah. The other part of it is, of course, when I'm booking weddings and booking them at prices that I've never booked them at before, and filling my calendar, that feels really good. That to me is success, because it means ultimately this is a job and this is a business, and the main point of it is not to leave a lasting legacy on the internet with my Instagram account or even my images, but it is to put my kids through college and have a relaxing retirement. So when I'm doing those things, I feel really good about what I'm doing, and feel like I'm on the right path. And I feel like I'm at my worst, for sure, when I'm had a dry spell and I haven't booked a wedding in a few months, and I'm going, am I doing something wrong? Am I still relevant? Because I still go through, even though I've been around for a while, I still go through those things. And I think those are the hardest things for me. I don't usually doubt myself on the artistic front, I don't think, but certainly business is very nuanced. Social media is always changing, marketing is always changing, and when I start to question, do I need to be kicking into another gear? Am I approaching this completely the wrong way? Have I already been dated out of the market? Those are the hardest times for me. The best times are during, obviously when it's the opposite of that. And I do feel like that is where a lot of my value comes from the business. It's not from Instagram followers. It's not from magazine features or covers or whatever. That all to me is just building blocks to the business and building blocks to booking that next wedding. and getting that amazing wedding planner's eyes on my work, and booking something with him or her, and then from there, that's where I feel really good about what I'm doing when that next thing happens.
Yeah, okay. You have had a lot of success, and what I'm curious about is how much failure has been underneath that success.
That's a great question. I think there was definitely quite a bit of failure, especially in the first couple years. I thought it was really cool that I had a photography business and that I wasn't working in an office. I felt really like I had a lot of freedom and that it was a cool job, and I took it for granted. And I failed to deliver shoots on time. I failed to get back to clients on emails. I lost a lot of bookings because I was just skating along and thought that, I've got it made. I'm doing great. This is a great life. I can wake up at 11 and, shoot a couple times a week and make some money, and I'm good. Yeah. And I just I hadn't really been introduced to the real world yet. And when the real world hit me and I had to learn how to work hard, that's when I would say I stopped making as many of those mistakes. Of course,
when was that moment? When did the real world hit you?
I think it was probably, if I started photography in 2008, I would say in 2010, 2011, when I was getting married and moving out of my parents' house, all that stuff. That was the real world hitting when Amy was keeping me honest too, going, "Hey, why haven't you delivered that shoot yet? Like, what are you doing?" Yeah. I feel like I was a dumb kid back then, but I was far too old to be making those mistakes and having any excuse for it. So the question was, about mistakes. I think, in more modern times, the past 5 years, I have been really lucky not to make any huge mistakes. I think, I've never made a big mistake with film and lost or ruined anything. I've never, double booked a wedding date and had a crisis on my hands. I think I've probably, a couple times I've probably paid for expensive vendor listings for too long, for a year or two more, and cost myself some thousands of dollars, when the fact is that those really weren't relevant anymore and they weren't working for me. But the reason I haven't made the mistakes is because I have two brains to be thinking of these things and to be avoiding these things. And if it were just me, not only do I have, her to constantly think about these things and give input, but also just to talk to all the time and make decisions together. I have a huge respect for anybody who does this on their own, and I know I have a huge advantage.
Yes, yeah. How do you think people that don't have the benefit of a partner or someone around them that can work with them, how do you think they should manage that?
I think that the photography community, at least the film community, looks out for each other, and they talk a lot and they help each other. And there's a lot of good forums, a lot of good Facebook groups, just a great tight-knit community that, beyond Amy, I have had a couple really good film wedding photographer friends who I'd be on 2-3 hour calls with all the time, every week, as I was learning to shoot film and building the business for the last 5 to 7 years. Yeah. And having people like that who are at a similar phase in the life of their business, or the life of maybe their film shooting career, or whatever it may be, having those people who are in similar circumstances to talk to and bounce ideas off of, or when you have a tough client, being able to call someone and talk through it. Yeah. I think that's huge. Yeah. I think when you're an island, I think it's a very tough place to be. Very tough.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have a big respect for anybody who does it on their own, because I truly feel that I had it easy.
Yeah. Okay. Just hop back to something you said a little while ago, which was around creating and still sort of pursuing new ideas with your photography. How do you balance that sort of artistic impulse to create and do new things with your brand's need for consistency? Because if you look at your Instagram, it's very consistent. So how do you balance those two things?
Oh, so I would say I'm by no means the best person at allowing myself to be more artistic and planning shoots that get me out of my comfort zone and doing things that sort of fulfill my artist heart. I'm very bad at that. Simply because running a business is a full-time job, and of course, now having a kid, it's my schedule is usually filled, and it's easy to make excuses for not setting up that next, fashion editorial shoot, something that's interesting and out of my wheelhouse, something that's going to just something that's going to push me, something that's going to be different from my normal day-to-day wedding and engagement shooting. So beyond that, so your question too was staying curated even if I'm doing these shoots that are maybe outside of what I'd normally do. And I guess I would say again, I don't do enough of that stuff to where it's even I have to make a conscientious effort to stay very curated. I would say most shoots that I do, I'm going to be able to post something from it on my Instagram, and it's going to still feel very consistent. So what I would say is that I can still do, very, very different styled shoots, very different, say, fashion or editorial or weird artistic or weddings that are in Bali or Europe or wherever, Texas, and post those all, on my website or Instagram or wherever people are going to look at photos, and still have a consistency with that, because I keep a formula that is consistent, a formula beyond the actual content of what I'm shooting, my formula for the way that I shoot and the film that I shoot and the way I rate my film and the way that I generally light things, and the way that I edit my images. Those are all, I stay pretty consistent with that stuff. And I think that creates consistency throughout my work. But I mean, every time, someone like you mentions doing those artistic shoots, it reminds me that that's something that I really have a hard time staying on the ball with. And that's something that I'll probably get off of this interview and hopefully go start thinking about what I'm going to do next.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to disrupt your,
no,
your psyche there.
This is exactly what I need. It's exactly what I need, because when I do those shoots, it's probably some of the most satisfying work that I do, because it reminds me that I can do something different from the other, 50, 60 shoots that I'm doing that I'm comfortable with and that I have kind of nailed down. And sometimes I do start to probably think I can't really do that other stuff, and that I'm not proving to myself that I can. So I get a lot of satisfaction when I go out and do that stuff. And I encourage anybody to force themselves to do those types of shoots, because you're going to gain a lot from it in personal satisfaction and also experience and pushing your skills forward and pushing your brand forward. People you will stand out a lot more posting a photo of a black and white image of a model on a moody beach that looks really killer and maybe very different from all of your other work. I think that's okay, because you're going to get a lot more people clicking in on that image than you are going to get with the green and white bouquet with the bridal white dress in the beautiful field picture, because there are so many of those out there. So if you can do something different, I don't think that detracts from your brand. I don't think it's a bad thing, even if it does look a little out of place. I think it adds a cool factor. I think it gets you noticed. And also I think you'll be proud of yourself. And there's a lot to be said for that.
And that sort of makes me think of, how do you create an impression, sort of like a lasting impression in an industry that's quite saturated with imagery?
I think by doing just that. I think the biggest impressions that I've made, a couple things come to mind from over the years that people consistently bring up. Fellow photographers or planners or different people in my life bring up a couple different shoots that they said, this is where I noticed you. This is where, like, you to me really started to stand out, and this is where I got intrigued. And those shoots were where I did a shoot for a veil and headpiece designer, and I had a gal laying in the water and looking up, and she was basically floating in the water in the veil. And that shoot ended up it was just a random idea that happened at the end of the shoot, but it was like, why not? Let's just do this. I have no idea how it's going to turn out. And it wasn't what the designer had requested at all, but having the audacity to propose that in the moment was, for me, if I could have easily not done it and said, it's not really what she wants, and I don't think I should just be quiet. But doing that, that shoot ended up on the cover of a magazine and getting me noticed a lot amongst at least peers, if nothing else. And that there's a lot to be said for that, because when you start getting noticed amongst your peers, that really builds into something. That obviously there's the two prongs where you're reaching the public and then also peers, and I think they both. I mean, when you get some notoriety amongst your peers in that respect, it feels good, but also you're going to start getting referred by other photographers, and your name's going to start getting mentioned to the wedding planners that really have the great clients. And then the other shoot that I'll quickly mention is just Amy and I had a random idea we wanted to shoot with our favorite model here in Oregon. And we said, well, let's just go out and do an artistic fun shoot. And we have no idea what the heck we're going to do. And Amy had just bought this fur coat. I don't even remember why, but we had this idea to go out in the snow with the model and have her be kind of this a city girl who was roughing it in the wilderness now. And we had the jacket and an axe and a bucket. And we just went out and got creative. And this was in 2012. And I booked weddings from that shoot. It had nothing to do with weddings. It had nothing bridal or wedding about it. But people noticed it because when they're scrolling through their feed, it looked entirely different from what they're used to seeing. And I would happily post that on my wedding photography Instagram feed, and it's going to fit in just fine. And I don't feel like it detracts from the rest of my work.
Okay. I know you've done a lot of workshops over the years, and you actually wrote a quote on Instagram. You said that of the 130 photographers I've worked with, the 10 who found the most success all conquered the local markets first. Can you tell us a bit more about that and why you think that is? Absolutely.
So I think we live in a world where it's easy to have a lot of FOMO, a lot of seeing what other people are doing. It's too accessible. We see what all these other photographers are doing, these cool locations, these amazing destinations, and that's what we immediately want. And nothing else is enough, because it's hard not to look at that stuff and be a little bit jealous or think, well, I'm just as good and that's what I should be shooting. Or I'm going to focus all of my efforts on getting to that point in the next year. And that it's good to it's good to have high hopes, for sure. It's good to shoot for the stars, but being realistic and chipping away and building the right way, the healthy way, I think is important, and it's the better way to do it. So for me, I started in Salem, Oregon, and I wanted to be the photographer to go to in Salem, Oregon, you know, a town of 100,000 people. And once I had that, once I felt like I was there, I wanted to get everybody in Oregon's eyes on my work. And I was trying to expand out there. And this was in a time when Instagram wasn't around. So I was lucky that I wasn't seeing all of these photographers doing these incredible things. Yeah. I thought this was just how you do things, how you build a business. And there was no second thought about it. That's just the way it was. And that built the business in a healthy way. And it gained this sort of grassroots following, and a big Facebook following that was loyal, and that really loved my work and followed along, because there were people in my local community. And that, having that base was just, it allowed me to build off of that and expand and move on to the next thing. And to go back to what you said, I think like I had said previously, the photographers that I see that really make it, and it is tough to make it. Especially, there are so many people shooting film right now. And I am so lucky that I started when I did, because it was a lot easier to stand out with film, to be the only film shooter in Oregon, and maybe one of only 10 on the West Coast. It was a lot easier to get noticed in that climate. But the photographers who do have success and who do end up shooting, who do end up expanding enough to shoot in really cool places and get paid the right amount to do it, and charge what they want to charge, and keep building up and being at the top of the game, are people that did crush that local market and expand from there. It's really hard to make the jump and just be. There are certainly people who do it, and there's always exceptions to the rule. But I would say the vast, on the whole, it takes you gotta work. You got to humble yourself enough to say, I'm going to, I just want the people in Salem, or my small community, to appreciate what I do and to be paying me for what I do. And that if I can prove myself there, then it's time to look onward to the next step. I definitely stand behind that. That's one of the things that, even as the landscape has changed, since I started photography till 2018, I think has remained true throughout.
Yeah. What sort of questions do photographers usually ask you in these workshops?
Oh, well, that's pretty open-ended. I think a lot of the same questions that you've been asking today. I think so. There are, when you look at wedding photography, there are so many aspects to it. I think that's why the online course that we had set out to create and did create, that's ended up being 750 pages. That's why it ended up being 750 pages, because there are so many different aspects to this business and this art form, that it's hard to even talk about it in a 4-day workshop. It's hard to even cover it all with constant content and constant questions. So, and again, that's why we set out to do the course, because
where can what's the course called, and where can people find it?
Oh yeah, it's wedding photography with Erich McVey, and we partnered with If I Made, who just does a lot of online courses,
Okay.
and yeah, it's offered on there, and of course, it can be found on my website as well. But
Okay. Okay.
yeah, super proud of the way it ended up, and like what I wanted to do was create a course. What Amy and I wanted to do was create a course that felt like we were putting all of the knowledge that we'd gained from over the years and all of the questions into basically one place, and never have to go back and revise it or hopefully add much to it. Obviously things change with markets and social media and even technology that could always use updates. But as a whole, the 99% of it, I walked away from it, and two years later, I have literally zero regrets and zero content that I feel like we missed out on including there. So yeah, really proud of how it ended up. And we also did some behind the scenes videos with it of me doing a few shoots, and included the galleries of those shoots. So I think it's a really cool thing to be able to watch the video, and I explain what I'm doing and what I'm looking for, and then be able to see the results in film right there beside it at that same time. Because film is like a very, very, very nuanced and it's a wild thing. I went into shooting film thinking it was a lot more straightforward and easy. I'm very guilty of what a lot of people are guilty of, which is thinking if I buy the camera that Jose Villa has and send it to the lab that he uses and have it scanned on their scanner and rate Fuji 400 at 200, that I could have my work look anything like his or something close to it. But the reality is that it takes years and years and years to learn all of the nuances that come along with film, and learn not only the technical side of it, but the artistic side, and looking at light and posing people, and having your camera settings the way that they need to be to create the result that you're setting out, that you're trying to create. But also then looking at the film scans, knowing how to analyze them and say, okay, this looks good because I exposed it the proper way, and because I lit it this way, and because the lab did do a good job at scanning, or this looks bad because I underexposed it, or maybe the lab dropped the ball a little bit and maybe we're having an off day there. So many nuances to it. It took me, I'm learning things every time I go out. I think, to go back again to what a lot of people ask about, a lot of people want to know why their film doesn't look incredible right from the beginning, and they're a beginner. They've only been shooting it for a year or two, and maybe they're only shooting 5 rolls at a wedding or 5 rolls on an engagement or portrait session, and expecting for their film scans to come out like Jose's. And that is just, it's not fair to them, and it's not fair to Jose, because that's discounting all of the many, many years and decades that he's put into learning all of those little things that make each image special. And it is a lot of little things that accumulate into one image there. And I could go on and on about all those different things, but I try to, in the course too, I try to address all those things. But still, when you go out and do it, it's not always going to be right there just from reading something. It's going to develop in here from going out and doing it over and over and over again, and doing it with different couples in different light and different settings, and then getting different results from the lab, and looking at your negatives and talking to the lab. So many things go into it, and so many conversations that I've had over the years to try to get my work looking pretty much where I want it, and pretty well consistent.
If someone is starting out as a photographer and they're shooting weddings, and they they look at you or Jose Villa, and they see someone that they want to sort of emulate. They want to achieve sort of success, brand success, business success, and artistic success. What do you think are the things they should really, sort of 2 or 3 things they should really focus on in the beginning couple of years?
So number 1 would be working harder than your competition. Working hard. Just put in the hours. I think that, and of course there's working, the saying, work smart, not hard. So don't just work to work, but certainly point your efforts in a way that make sense. If blogging is now irrelevant, if having a personal blog is irrelevant, which I'm guilty of this too. I just blogged like 30 shoots like a few months ago, and then I realized that may not have been a good use of my time. But if that's irrelevant, it doesn't just mean put in 16-hour days and just do whatever you can think of as fast as you can, and that's going to accumulate to building your business up and getting where you want to be. So I would say, but I would say working hard is definitely a cure-all in a lot of senses. It's the person who works hard has a much better chance to come out on top. That is one big thing I've learned. Making a plan, some kind of a plan for where you want to be in a couple years, or in a year, or in 3 months, and then setting some goals and strategies for how you're going to get there. Writing it out, doing spreadsheets, all of those things, just keeping in check, not keeping in check, but checking in with yourself, and keeping tabs on where you're at and how you're going to get there, I think is a really good thing that's helped me. Amy was really good about keeping me honest in that respect. She calls herself the spreadsheet queen for a reason. And we used to have, we run all the numbers ahead of time. We set, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, we set goals for ourselves and figure out how we can get there. A big thing as well is, if you're a film shooter, the reality is, of course, that film costs money. And the reality is that our families depend on us to make money to survive. So it's easy for me to say, go out and shoot as much film as possible and don't think about the costs, because it's not my life, it's yours. And I know that you'll be a better photographer if you do that, but maybe you can't pay the rent because, your significant other is in medical school right now, and that's just not realistic. That's not realistic for you. So as much as you can, give yourself don't make it harder on yourself than it needs to be in terms of learning and growing with film. It's hard enough to get good at it when you're shooting it all the time. It's even harder when you limit yourself by saying, I can only shoot, that I'm only going to shoot this many rolls per shoot or per wedding, and then expect yourself to get as good as the guy or gal that's, your competition. That's just it's not fair to yourself. So look at the numbers, see what you can afford to shoot, and try to go out there and shoot it. I mean, I got good relatively quickly because I wasn't thinking about the costs. I mean, I was to a certain extent, but I was allowing myself to go out, make mistakes, shoot a ton of film, and get better, where the people that I was in competition with weren't doing that. The vast majority of them weren't doing those things. And maybe for good reason. I'm not dogging on it at all. That's reality. Not everybody has a wife with a corporate job and a steady income to be able to fall back on, which is what I had. So that's again one of the biggest parts of my success, and what I can tell others about becoming a successful film shooter, especially in this climate where there are hundreds and hundreds of film shooters now,
Yeah.
Many of which are creating really beautiful work, and many of which are charging possibly less than what they probably need to charge in order to turn a healthy profit.
Yes.
And you can make excuses for yourself and say, I'm in a saturated market, or, oh, this person, they're charging half of what I charge. It's not fair, and I just don't have a chance. But don't get wrapped up in that stuff. Focus on yourself. Focus on moving your work forward and your business forward, creating images that are better than theirs and that are the best that you can create. And when I say better than theirs, I don't mean compare yourself to anybody else, because that's not healthy. But at least, in your head, that are better than the competitions and that are the best you can create, and working hard to get your work out there in as many places as possible so that it's unavoidable for people to come across your work and for people to want to follow you and be intrigued by you. Yeah. If you make it unavoidable for them to see your work by getting your work featured, building your Instagram following, you're going to get that. Those are leading to good things, and you're going to get noticed by that wedding planner who has the high paying clients. You're going to get noticed by the photography community, who is going to in turn maybe refer you or want to connect with you or just have a general respect for you, which just leads to good things. So I think staying on the path, working hard, and getting your work out there, making it unavoidable for others to see it. Those are all things that just can't be denied. Those are undeniably good things to do.
Yeah. Great. Erich, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. And if people want to find you online, Instagram, is that where you mostly are?
Yeah, Instagram's good. I'm pretty bad about posting on there, but Instagram. Maybe this is another. You're pointing out all of my flaws. Not you pointing out. Well, we're bringing up all of my flaws in this. It's like a therapy session today. So I'm walking away. I'm going to be better on Instagram, and I'm going to go do artistic shoots.
Okay, well,
that's what I've gained from today.
I hope that's a good outcome.
It's a very good thing. No, I really appreciate you having me on, and it was really awesome to chat. I feel like we covered some really good stuff. I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. Great. Thanks, Erich. Take care.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Bye-bye.
You too.